Good evening. I would like to call our regular council meeting for Monday, June 14th to order. Hello to members of the public joining us via live web stream or to those who may be watching the recording at a later time. I'm Mayor McNeil Smith, and joining me in the council chamber to my far right is Councillor Garnett, to my immediate right is Councillor Fallett, and to my left is Councillor Rintoul. Our three council colleagues are joining us via Zoom. You can see them on your screen. Good evening to Councillors Duncan, O'Keefe, and Wainwright. And good evening to staff who are both in the chamber and participating via Zoom as well. I'd like to begin tonight with a territorial acknowledgement. I want to begin by sincerely acknowledging that we are holding tonight's meeting in the traditional territory of the Saanich First Nations, the Sartlip, the Sawat, the Sycam, and the Pakwachin Nations on the Saanich Peninsula, and the Malahat Nation on the western shore of Saanich Inlet. This is our first council meeting since we and people across Canada learned that the bodies of 215 children were found in unmarked graves at the site of a Kamloops residential school. This is yet more evidence and a painful reminder of the physical harm and death, emotional trauma, and devastating cultural impacts on Indigenous peoples across Canada while the residential school system was in place for over 100 years. There were children separated from the parents in intergenerational families of our Saanich nations. The names are known for 202 Indigenous children who died in the 5 residential schools on Vancouver Island. We do not yet know the true number. The trauma and healing continues for all of us today and into the future. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission completed its report with recommendations 5.5 years ago. While we acknowledge the wrong that was done in the past, truth and reconciliation is an urgent journey we must continue and to make individually and together. Let us pause for a moment of silence for the Indigenous children who died while attending residential schools, and to reflect on how each of us will listen, learn, and engage with our Saanich neighbors and other First Nations to seek a more respectful relationship. Thank you. I'll next turn to our next item, approval of the agenda. We do have 2 amendments before approval. We have an addition of Councillor Duncan with a report under Council Report under item 11C regarding Peninsula Streams. And Councillor Rintoul has requested we raise item 15.9 from correspondence for information to correspondence. This is a letter from Mr. Rinald, and it will be item 14A. And with that, I would ask for a motion for the amended agenda, please.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. We'll now turn to our public participation period. And this evening we have 3 speakers who will be joining us via Zoom to make their remarks to Council. And we do have 1 letter to be read to Council that was submitted. And I'll begin with our speakers. And I'd first ask Mr. Rinald if you can connect, please. Good evening, Mr. Rinald. I think you're muted.
Is that off now?
Yeah, good evening. You do have the floor for 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Mel Rinald. I live at number 410, 2447 Henry Avenue in Sydney. You will have received in your package a letter to Mayor and Council regarding the cost of water and our utility bills for Q4 2020 and Q1 2021. I noted that in Q4 2020, all users paid $6.50 per gallon of water consumed, subject to a minimum usage. In Q1 2021, a minimum user of 3,077 gallons pays $11.87 per 1,000 gallons, and a user of 18,000 gallons pays $6.48 per 1,000 gallons. I've reviewed the circular provided with the utility bill and the staff presentation to Mayor and Council that presented comments like there is very little change, and to create a better sense of fairness in how different accounts with the same characteristics are being charged. Please consider a minimum user paying $6.50 per 1,000 gallons in Q4 2020, and then $11.87 per 1,000 gallons in Q1 2021 is not a very little change. Nor does paying $11.84 per 1,000 gallons for a minimum user compared to a user of $18,000 paying $6.48 per 1,000 gallons to create a better sense of fairness. In fact, neither of these are what they say. In fact, they're just the opposites to little change and sense of fairness. As I reviewed the information available and my dialogue with staff, other items stand out for me. I did not see any reference to benchmarking with other jurisdictions. Do they need to see the same kind of methodology? Staff indicated that a similar methodology was being considered in 2022 for sewer costs. If so, I repeat my earlier comments. And staff implied that Mayor and Council made an informed decision in approving this change. Considering the points I've raised, maybe Mayor and Council did not have sufficient analysis of impacts to different levels of consumption or any discussion of other jurisdictions moving to this methodology to make an informed decision. I asked Mayor and urged Mayor and Council to direct staff to return to the prior billing model in Q2 2021 and ask staff to bring forward a recommendation to Mayor and Council to a billing methodology encompassing both water and sewer that is truly fair to all households in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rinald. We appreciate you coming before Council. I'll next ask Ms. Charlene Froom to confirm you're connected.
Connected.
Good evening, Ms. Froom. You have the floor for 3 minutes.
Hi. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for this opportunity to speak regarding the letter I wrote to Council. I would like to acknowledge and thank both Councillors Duncan and O'Keefe for reaching out to me to speak to me on that letter. And I have told Councillor Duncan that I would not read the letter in today's meeting, but I would like to address the underlying issue of it. That when comments are made that pit the rest of us against all of us, people are left out of decisions that are very important. The disabled community, for some reason, is being left out a lot of decisions that are being made. These decisions are being made in regards to climate change, affordable housing, and COVID. And while things have been changed and measured up for the rest of us, decisions are being made that are leaving the rest of us out. One of the pet projects of councillors and communities are climate change, and decisions are being made that exclude people with disabilities. Park roads are being closed and access to accessible washrooms are being denied to people with disabilities. I don't want to see this happen in Sydney, that when we make decisions based on what's important to somebody who has the power to influence policy and decisions, that leave the rest of us out. I have a real problem with that. We need to include everybody, all people, not just the rest of us. Whether you're a rich retired person, a family trying to eke out a living in Sydney, a business person trying to keep their business doors open, or a disabled person knocking at the door to say, please remember me. we all need to be respectful of each other and include each other to minimize the needs of others over the wants of the rest of us. Left me stunned, hurt, and disappointed and scared. So I appreciate the fact that council has taken the time to talk to me, explain their position on it. My letter stands, and I look forward to being able to work with all of you to make Sydney a place where we all feel included and valued. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Froom, for taking the time to speak before council this evening. Thank you. I'll turn to our third and last speaker, Mr. Peter Hunt. If you could confirm you're connected, please.
Yes,
Good
I am.
evening,
Can you
Mr.
hear
Hunt.
me?
You have the virtual floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, Honorable Mayor and Council. I'm the president of Victoria Distillers. Thanks for giving me a few minutes to present the proposal that you'll be looking at later from Victoria Distillers. Like everyone here, we had to make some significant changes to our business to adapt to COVID-19. One of those was to remove our underused cocktail lounge to make space for more production. This proposal you look at today just amends the already approved endorsements. I'd like to explain briefly how this would impact you as a guest. If we were to host you at, say, an open house on our patio, which would be a special event area, under the current license, you would be able to walk into the distillery with your Empress and Tonic in to look at our brand new stills that we have in there. However, there would be an invisible line that you wouldn't be able to cross partway through the room. That, you know, if you wanted to walk to our old manufacturing area where our bottling line and our older stills are, you wouldn't be able to do that under the current licensing. So the change just expands the special event area to make sure that our walls match our licensing. We don't intend to change our business plan and begin hosting regular special events. However, if we do choose to host the occasional special event, we would like the experience to be a fantastic one. Overall, this change will lower the occupant load in the building and reduce the impact on the neighbors, since we'll no longer have late night bar service, or in fact any bar service at all. This is a small amendment to our current approved endorsement. I hope the town of Sydney is able to approve it without going to the lengthy public notification and consultation process. I appreciate your time, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt, for your remarks to council tonight on the agenda item that does come up later. That ends our speakers for this evening. I'll turn to Mr. Humble, who has a letter to read from Mr. David Willows.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, this is from David Willows, who resides at 1491 Kersey Road in central Saanich. And the letter reads as follows. Dear Mayor and Council, this letter is to bring to Council's attention a growing issue of conflicting priorities, as highlighted by my comments made by a councillor, during the May 25th, 2021 discussion relating to the off-street parking bylaw amendments. Many of us have issues we are passionate about, and we choose different ways to affect change in our communities. Sometimes, however, those passions become a focus that creates blind spots and results in unintentionally causing harm. I believe this was the case at the May 25th, 2021 council meeting. Environment and housing costs are immediate issues of concern to communities across BC. Too often, however, local politicians with a passion for such issues fail to look beyond their own context and see only their desire to effect immediate change. In the process, seniors and people with disabilities who have a weaker voice are often left out, sometimes even intentionally, citing added costs or conflicts with other priorities of council, such as the desire for immediate climate action. As a parent with a child who has significant disabilities, including the need to use a wheelchair and an adapted van for transport, it has become a third full-time job after my paid work and family caregiving responsibilities to work with local municipalities and councils and help bring an accessibility lens to the decision-making process, ensuring that the voices of people with disabilities are heard. Policymakers without the first-hand context of living with a disability or being a full-time caregiver often do not appreciate the significant impact policy decisions have on seniors and people with disabilities, as able-bodied policymakers are typically much more easily able to adapt to the new circumstances. Active transportation, affordable housing, and climate action are priorities we all share, but their relentless pursuit cannot continue to be at the repeated disproportionate expense of seniors and people with disabilities who are unable to make the changes many able-bodied community members want them to. Often municipal councillors and staff do not have the personal experience of disability, leading them to unknowingly assume or suggest alternatives that cannot meet the needs of people with differing levels of ability and disability. Working with disability organizations and advisory committees across the province, I have gained a broad perspective, a wide-angle accessibility lens, but even that does not show me the full picture. If in my position I am continuing to learn, it is no wonder most policymakers fail to appreciate the importance and legal necessity of accessibility. Each community needs a resource they can draw on to assist with that accessibility lens. I am already working with members of council and other disability representatives to develop a regional advisory committee to support all 3 Peninsula communities with disability issues. The second issue I need to address is applying different lenses when considering our words. Passion about cause can lead us to make statements without considering their impact on others. Divisive comments that segregate them and the rest of us are harmful when working towards an equitable, inclusive community. Whether it was intentional or not, stereotyping the group of people someone believed would benefit most from the off-street parking bylaw amendment was also inappropriate and made my family and I feel like we are invisible to policymakers. Through the lens of a father that must fight every day for inclusion of his family in the community, these words hurt. The point is this: words matter. Anytime someone is choosing to be divisive in the way they speak, harm will be done to someone. Creating division is not an effective way to create an inclusive and welcoming community, and I would encourage members of council to do a periodic self-check. Listen to the recorded council proceedings and try to filter your own words through the ears of a father that struggles every day against bias and barriers affecting his disabled child. I hope this can be a learning opportunity for all involved, and that the good work done by members of staff and council on the proposed accessible parking updates can continue into the broader spectrum of municipal policy. I remain available to assist in any way I can.
Thank you, Mr. Humble, and thank you, Mr. Willows, for taking the time in your written letter to council. That ends our public participation period this evening, and we'll now turn to presentations. We have 3 this evening, and I would ask our first presenter, Mr. Bob Peart, to connect, and then I will introduce your presentation, sir. Good evening. So we have Mr. Bob Peart, representing the Saanich Peninsula Environmental Coalition, also known as SPEC. They submitted a report dated May 2021 to council that's included in our agenda package, and we also received Mr. Peart's presentation slides on the Saanich Peninsula Bioregional Framework. Mr. Peart, you do have 10 minutes for your presentation. We'd be pleased if you'd be able to take any questions my colleagues may have at the end of your presentation.
Hey, thank you very much, and hello, Mayor and Council. Thank you for providing me the time to present to you the bioregional framework for the Saanich Peninsula as developed by the Saanich Peninsula Environmental Coalition. Tonight I'm presenting a summary of the key points in the framework, and I understand that the complete document is in your evening's council meeting package. Before beginning, I want you to know how much the coalition appreciates the advice and insight that we've received throughout this process from your municipal staff and a number of your council members. So thank you very much. Next slide. So who are we? As a reminder, the coalition grew from the recommendations of the highly successful Sydney Summit in 2018. Since then, the Saanich Peninsula Environmental Coalition has come together to represent a broad range of interests and values, from the Peninsula Chamber to Peninsula Streams Society, and from the Roberts Bay residents to the Saanich Leadership Council. Many of our member groups you are familiar with and you work with regularly. One individual that I do want to acknowledge is Jerem Gawley. Jerem was our U of Vic co-op student. He helped us develop our ideas and he drafted the document you have in front of you. So Jerem, if you're listening tonight, thank you very much. Next slide, please. In the development of the framework, it's been fundamental for us to collaborate with the Saanich Nation to ensure we've grounded our work with the Indigenous perspective and that we have reflected the Saanich interests and values. To this end, please note the opening recognition on pages 1 and 2 and the manner in which the Saanich knowledge and place names have been incorporated throughout our document. In particular, I want to acknowledge the contribution of the members of the Saanich Technical Committee, in particular Tiffany Joseph. The process with the Saanich has been enriching, and our collaboration with them continues and is an ongoing process. Next slide, please. Tonight, the Coalition is asking you to do 3 things. To adopt the bioregional framework as policy, integrate its vision, principles, and outcomes into your official community plan. To provide direction to staff to develop an implementation plan and to report back to you regularly on its delivery. And 3, while doing so, respect the Saanich people, their interests and values, and work closely with your colleagues in Central and North Saanich. Next slide, please. As you read through the purpose and vision, it's important to acknowledge that the environment doesn't follow jurisdictions or administrative boundaries, and that the natural environment is an integral part of the health and well-being of the Saanich Peninsula and the community members that you represent. So aligning your OCP review with North Saanich and Central Saanich is critically important. To this end, having a common consultant modus was a really smart move. Next, please. To achieve a common vision for the Saanich Peninsula, connectivity is a key element, and it highlights why collaboration with your neighbors is so essential. In the specific case of the Saanich Peninsula, it's important that connectivity be considered for each of north-south, east-west, and the marine foreshore connection. Next, please. As you review the 3 principles, you can appreciate that ecosystem integrity, jurisdictional collaboration, and community perspective interweave and interact. For success, you need all 3 to be considered, as they're each equally important, and all 3 need to be present, as without one, you won't achieve your goal of ecological sustainability. As well, public communication and transparency is paramount for support. Next, please. This slide is a visualization of ecological sustainability and how the vision, principles, and outcomes intermesh and support each other. The framework is designed to be descriptive, not prescriptive. And I want to stress our intent is not for the implementation of the framework to be additive, but instead to build on the solid, positive work you already have underway. Next, please. To close off, given COVID, our public engagement has been limited, but we have made the effort to go beyond the Coalition members, and we plan to do so again this summer and fall. Our platforms are Facebook and PlaceSpeak, and through these platforms, we reached more than 1,000 people from around the region. Next. So just to reinforce our request tonight, we're asking the Sydney Council adopt the bioregional framework as policy and integrate its vision, principles, and outcomes into your official community plan, and collaborate with North Saanich, Central Saanich, and with the Saanich Nation as you do so. And just for your information, during this month, we're making similar presentations to both North Saanich and the Central Saanich councils. Next, please. So thank you. The bioregional framework framework provides an approach to sub-regional planning and highlights key principles that, when implemented, will help you face the current challenges in front of you, such as housing, density, and water conservation. The bioregional framework provides an opportunity for each of you as members of council to leave a lasting legacy and to help ensure the Saanich Peninsula is healthy and productive into the future. So thank you very much. Have a productive meeting this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Peart, for your presentation. I'll turn to colleagues if they have any questions for Mr. Peart. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan first.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Peart. I had one question. When looking at the other collaborators, I see the museum is not there. And one thing I've always liked doing when I go to the museum is looking at the historical maps and the drawings there. And I know they have probably quite a few in the archives. Is any of that going to be used when you look at prior conditions?
That's really a good thought. And to be honest with you, I hadn't thought of that. So we will work at accessing that archive material, because the background and history and how we came to where we are is really important. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions from colleagues? Seeing none, Bob Peart, I want to thank you for your leadership going back to November of 2018 with the Sydney Summit on Habitat and Environment, which you were involved with. But the formation of SPEC and your leadership, bringing the other organizations that you acknowledged early in your presentation this evening, your collaboration with Saanich Nations is to be commended. We appreciate receiving this version of your document. It's been a work in progress for some time now, and we look forward to considering a recommendation to staff this evening. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And I'll turn to council if there's a consideration of a motion for this evening. Sorry. Okay. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that the Saanich Peninsula Bioregional Framework be forwarded to staff for review and report back to council on potential next steps for incorporating the Saanich Peninsula Bioregional Framework policy into the OCP and implementing its recommendations.
Do we have a seconder?
Second?
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor Wainwright.
No, I think it's straightforward.
Thank you. Councillor Garnett, did you wish to elaborate? Any discussion from colleagues? Seeing none, all those in favor? None opposed, motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you again, Mr. Peart. We'll turn to the next presentation, and I'll just confirm that Mr. Gord Horth is connected before I introduce his presentation.
I am, Your Worship. Thank you.
Good evening, Gord Horth. Welcome back to the Sydney Council Chamber. It's been a while to see you in person. We're connected virtually this evening. I look forward to seeing you in person again in the future. We do have a presentation from Gord Horth, General Manager of the Capital Regional Emergency Services Telecommunications Organization, better known as CREST, with an update. Mr. Horth, you have the floor for 10 minutes. We'd be pleased if you would take our questions at the conclusion.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Council, for having me tonight. We just completed our upgrade project over the last few years, and I think it's timely to just sort of give you an update in terms of what it looks like, what it means for first responders, and maybe particularly for those in Sydney. I think you have my presentation, so if I could go to the next slide, please. This is. Do you have it up?
No, Mr. Horth, we don't have your slide. Are you able to use it in presentation mode?
I'm going to share it right now.
Thank you.
There we go. Do you have it now?
Okay, yeah, it's we're seeing your slide presentation on the left. I don't know if you can enlarge the this single slide as you scroll through them. There we go.
Does that look better?
Yeah. Yes.
Great, thank you. So this is what the system looked like in 2016. So we had 10 transmit sites to serve the CRD. You can see how it would influence Sydney. Our primary transmit source really was Mount Newton at the time. We had another repeater at Cloak Hill, but we've made some considerable progress since then. And this is what the new system looks like now. So we have about 30 transmit sites throughout the whole region. Revamping Mount Newton, Cloak Hill is another of your primary sources for Sydney, for example. And I'll talk a little bit later, but of course we try to do some future proofing of Sydney as well by securing some space in your new fire hall. But additionally, even though we've been working pretty hard for the last 4 years to provide these enhancements, there's always more work to do. And so in the inset, you can see some of the other areas where we're still working on acquiring sites. A fair amount of them are out on the west coast, going out to Jordan River. We're still working actively on a site on Salt Spring, and we're working on one on Bear Mountain. So there is a number of sites that are under active either investigation or negotiation. Some of the key features, and perhaps your chief has given you an update on that, are aside from increased coverage because we've got more infrastructure, we have new radios as well, and they've got some pretty excellent noise canceling technology in them. The other big enhancement really was moving to 700 megahertz. It's a different frequency, less interference than we get from our American friends or from some commercial users of VHF. So the new 700 megahertz has made a big difference on the audio clarity and the background noise. So there's just less interference in general. And as well with the fire department particularly and BC Ambulance, we moved to a digital sort of platform for them. Police always use digital, but fire and ambulance were on analog. So moving to the digital platform as well has made a big difference in the audio clarity. And we're set up nicely to be able to add features over the air, upgrading in many instances with the new technology. The new platform allows that fairly seamlessly, just like your PCs. And I think the other thing is in terms of greater redundancy in the system. So if we to lose a site or some major infrastructure, we have the ability to get some backup from Ecom and vice versa. So we're using the same platform as a Motorola platform P25. So we do have some that extra redundancy and capabilities in the event something catastrophic happening on the island or on the lower mainland. So what is next? Well, as Sydney densifies in lots of the urban areas, we're encouraging municipalities, and we've been working with your municipality particularly, to look at bidirectional amplifiers for very dense buildings to boost signals. So when first responders have to go into these buildings, they can still access the network and get on the system. Some of the other key points are we're also replacing our paging platform. It's a separate platform from our radio network, and that will be in place, we believe, by next year. So, and as I said, we're trying to do some future proofing, and there was a great opportunity when you were building your new fire hall. And so we partnered with you folks really to acquire some space there, so that in the event as Sydney gets bigger and denser or more activity outside the region, like on the airport, we've got some added infrastructure to assist first responders when they're doing their jobs. So as we finish the system upgrade, we did a user survey. We hadn't done one for a couple of years. We asked an awful lot of questions, but I won't give you the 54 pages. But it boils down to basically how they liked the performance of the new mobile radios and the new portable radios and the technical support they got from CREST staff. So as you can see from the mobile radios, which typically give you better performance or a more powerful radio, a bigger antenna. So the coverage and clarity were very good numbers in the 80s and 90s. And as we build more infrastructure in those areas I showed you on the second slide, we expect those numbers to go up. And the same thing on the portable radios. In the 80s and high 80s on the clarity side because of the digital environment. Again, sort of performance metrics look pretty promising. So that was heartening, and perhaps even most heartening for us from the staff perspective is the technical support. Is everyone who answered that question felt that Do they get the right technical support? Are staff knowledgeable? Are we timely? Do we give them good information? And we got 100% there, which was nice, right? Maybe we got lucky. And I'm thinking that hopefully we're doing a decent job. So, and then in terms of performance by the numbers, these are early numbers. So because we just completed the system late last year, but you can see it's an active system. Lots of transmissions. Just under 3,000 radios in service across 50 agencies in the CRD. We're doing about 723 calls per hour, so that hasn't changed, old system versus new system. But the interesting thing, because we built in extra capacity on the new system, there's more channels available to first responders when things get really busy. On our old system, we would have about one busy about every 700 calls. And you can see with that added channel capacity and added infrastructure, that we're getting a busy about every 8,500 calls. So that's a big jump in performance. So, and even though a busy tends to be only a couple seconds before you're added in the queue and you get the go-ahead tones to use the system, a couple of seconds can make a big difference for first responders, obviously. And the system availability, what you shoot for in public safety world is, we call it 5 nines. So you can see we're at 99.998. We're just a shade off of that preferential 5 nines, but I'm hoping by next year, as we've added some more infrastructure, we'll see that numbers get to the 5 nines. So that really is all I wanted to bring to your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions from members of council or staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horth, for your presentation. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thanks, Mr. Horth, for your presentation. As Sydney's nominee to the CREST board, where I sit on the executive, I just wanted to share with those listening to your presentation and my colleagues on council. CREST is a pretty leanly staffed organization, and you've just completed a significant project with the P25 rollout, and to see the early user survey results come back as positive as they are, I certainly wanted to congratulate you, Gord, and your staff for the incredible amount of work you've accomplished with that project. Perhaps you could speak to Sydney specifically, and I know you talked about the community safety building here and the arrangement you had for some capacity there. So if you could speak to perhaps the long-term intent with regard to that. And also you spoke to development and encouraging municipalities to work in their with regards to building development opportunities to amplify signals, and whether or not you've seen any challenges in the current system specific to Sydney and some of its new building projects.
No, thanks, Councillor Rintoul. To speak to the opportunity in your new fire hall, we know Sydney is growing, and we saw the opportunity that in terms of trying to secure a transmission space is often very challenging. You want it to be on one of your taller buildings, and you want it to be in a place where it will augment the network that already exists. And so we saw it was a good fit for us to acquire some space. I think that when we did testing with the RCMP, first and foremost, when we updated the new network on the peninsula, we saw pretty good coverage in comparison to some of the other areas in the CREST network. So we think you're fairly well served at the moment, but we know that over time, as the buildings get bigger, taller, and more dense, we're going to need that additional capacity that we've created at your fire hall. So I don't think I could put a time frame on it, but it will be dictated probably by how much activity and growth you see. But we constantly get feedback, obviously, from your fire chief, the RCMP detachment commander on the peninsula, BC Ambulance, and so I would expect we'll be using it sooner than later, just the way things are being growing in the CRD in general, but particularly on the peninsula. So we're well positioned to be able to do that. Once we've established the need, we work with your fire department in the building, and we could get that established fairly quickly. So I think we're probably in better shape in Sydney than probably any other municipality, just because of that partnering opportunity. And although we provide a pretty robust network, as the buildings as they go underground and they become thicker, and some unusual building materials, or glazed glass doesn't do well with radio waves. More steel and concrete, radio waves aren't particularly fond of that as well. On some buildings, doing an in-building solution to boost signal is a good way to provide or augment the network that's on the outside and pull the two together. So we were working with your fire department within the last 6 months, really on a new building to provide a bidirectional amplifier, and the cooperation that we got with your fire department and the building officials was great. And but we'll see more of these bidirectional amplifiers in building enhancement solutions on the Saanich Peninsula, definitely in Victoria, Langford, Colwood, and that the technology is very good, and it's not particularly expensive when it's designed into the building. So if the building can be cabled accordingly right from the outset instead of retrofitted after the fact, you get much better results, and it's much more cost benefit effective to the owner.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, Mr. Horth.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor O'Keefe. So you're just muted there, Councillor.
Right, yeah, thanks. Thank you for the presentation, and just trying to understand the amplification in the building a bit more. And in terms of, is that something that other municipalities are making a requirement where new buildings are going up? They're just telling developers right from the get-go that if you have a multi-family building of a certain height or mass, that these things have to be put in. And also with that equipment, would the cost of that equipment be borne by the developer, or is that something that CREST would provide and install?
Those are great questions. So there is more and more municipalities are requiring developers to look at that as a solution if they meet certain thresholds on their building envelopes. So typically, if you're going at least 2 stories underground, sometimes one, depends where it is. There is a bit of a judgment call, and depending on what kind of building materials, if it's a wood frame, radio waves get in there fairly easily. But if it's all concrete and steel, then there's some bigger challenges, and a bidirectional amplifier might be a good solution. So there is some education, I guess, in terms of with the developers world as well as municipalities, and we try and work closely to develop either building standards or building guidelines in either the permitting process or the variance permit process, so that we can assist, in your instance, Sydney, as you work with the developers in your community. So typically it is a cost borne by the developer. So as I say, if it's done at the building design stage, all you're doing is doing cabling runs to various parts of the building, terminating usually in the basement by your fire suppression panel. And then there's the actual apparatus. It is about a $25,000 piece of equipment once installed, and it's another radio that boosts the signal within that building. So when first responders going in, they can still get their signal. So CREST steps up to the plate and does the infrastructure when we're doing a transmit facility like we did at your farm hall. So that is a CREST cost, the overall network. And if it's a single building in terms of a localized solution, that cost falls on the developer. So hopefully that helps.
Okay, and just one follow-up then. You did make reference to some requirements for certain sorts of buildings and that sort of thing. So is that something that you've already created and is available for local government or municipalities to reference?
Yes, yeah. So we borrowed heavily from our experience with our neighbors across the water in Greater Vancouver at ECOM, and we've shared that information. And the fire chiefs talk amongst themselves and the building officials. So there is some standardization in terms of how they tackle some of these more dense, larger buildings. And as I say, we did one recently with your fire department. I think it was a successful outcome.
Okay, and I see now we have our chief online, so maybe a question to him through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may. So would I be correct in assuming that if there was the need for these sort of building amplification devices to be input, that we would receive some guidance from the chief on that?
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. Early on, we experienced this considerable building boom in the town. I identified this as an issue and actually embedded in our building bylaw a requirement if buildings met a certain mass and a certain construction type, largely like Mr. Horth specified, over a certain square footage in meters, a certain amount of glazing and concrete, that there's a testing requirement that they have to pass to determine if a bidirectional amplifier is required. That's been in place since prior to, basically we put that in place when the development on the old fire hall site and the movie theater were put in place. Those were kind of the big push for that. So it's in place. It's embedded in our building bylaw, and the requirements are clearly articulated to any developer applying for an application that meet that criteria.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question and for the answers. Any further questions? Just a comment and a question. As a previous nominee from council to the CREST board some 10 years ago, and at that time the technology was pretty impressive, but it was known that the next technology would come, and it's great to see such a successful introduction of the new technology. My question is, how does this new technology compare in the province, in the country, or elsewhere in terms of its capability?
No, you're right. It's come a long way since you served on the board, Your Worship. But basically, the P25 platform that we've deployed it really is the world standard. So that's what ECOM is using in Vancouver. That is what the province of Alberta rolled out with a couple of years ago. They have a province-wide network. We're very fortunate to have that P25 environment, and they will serve us well for the next 15 years. You see lots of examples of it being deployed south of the border, and the Maritimes just went with a P25 system through Motorola, same platform we've had about 2 years ago. So it really is the standard. There's a rollout going in Quebec. I don't think through the whole province, so that really is, we're ahead of the curve, I think, from most large sort of communities, dense community. To be able to deploy this kind of technology. So it really is a nice service to offer people like the chief and your BCI and your RCMP detachment. So I think they'll be well served by it for the next 10, 15 years for sure. Well, thank you, and congratulations again on its introduction and your collaboration with people around the region, such as our chief, and we look forward to its continued success. Thank you again for your presentation and taking the time this evening. Thanks for having me. We'll turn to our third presentation this evening, and it's, I'll just ask our speaker, Mr. Propotny, if you're connected, sir.
Yes, I'm connected.
Okay, thank you. So we have a presentation by Miroslav Propotny from Ziedler Architecture, and it's with regards to Development Permit Application number DP 100821 and Development Variance Permit Application number DV 100300 at a commercial property at 2071 Malaview Avenue West. And Mr. Propotny, you do have the floor for 10 minutes. We'd be pleased if you would take our questions at the end of your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, members of the council, members of the staff. My name is, as noted, Miroslav Propotny, and I am registered with AIBC Architect. I represent Zeidler Architecture. And also I act as an agent on behalf of the property owner and representing the client, which is the province of BC. I do not have any specific presentation slides. However, I can share drawings if required. I was told that pretty much you are very familiar with the submitted materials. Again, thank you for the opportunity to present this very important project, which is the subject of the project is accommodation of the Ministry of Forest, Land, Natural Resource Operations, and the Ministry of Environment laboratory groups at Unit A, 2071 Malaview Avenue. These groups are relocating from North Road at Camosun College, and as the college plans to convert the building in which these laboratory groups are located and the associated property into a film studio. After an extensive RFP process, which was undertaken in early 2020, the Malaview property was identified as the most suitable to accommodate the laboratory groups and their current and future program requirements. Following the RFP process, Zeidler Architecture team was retained to provide required consulting services. So what we're doing here? In short, we are relocating 5 independent laboratory groups, which their program range from analytical chemistry lab, and that include trace metal lab, DNA lab and water lab, soil testing lab, forest pathology lab, and air, snow, groundwater monitoring operations. While analytical chemistry lab operations are mostly limited to operations on site, other groups, such snow monitoring group, operate in the field, and they will use Malaview location as a place where they will collect data, assemble, test, and recalibrate field equipment prior to deployment throughout the province, and also train personnel involved in the provincial snow monitoring program. To accommodate all groups and their requirements, an extensive upgrade work is required. This work will include building and occupant safety upgrades, envelope and energy upgrades, structural, mechanical, electrical, security, and site work. As shown on the submitted for development permit and variance permits drawings, the work can be divided into 3 main areas, which, as I noted, is reflected on in the submitted package. Work in the building is shown on drawing DP-03 and will include a reorganization of the entrances to allow sample receiving, floor infills to increase usable space on level 2, structural improvements including extensive seismic work such roof diaphragm upgrades and new shear walls, new elevator to make the second currently inaccessible floor accessible, new barrier-free washrooms, and as shown on the floor plans, extensive architectural upgrades to accommodate the group requirements. Mechanical upgrades will include new state-of-the-art HVAC system addressing differently chemical, clean lab environment and field support and office functions. The new mechanical equipment sizing is proposed to be based on the projected future climate change to account for the expected increase in outdoor air temperature over the next 25 years or so. Also, the building improvements will include envelope improvements such as installation of new triple pane windows and installation of better quality thermal insulation to improve the thermal performance of the building. Proposed exterior finishes are to match existing in order to better match, to better blend with the existing environment. The other area of work is Compound 1, which is located on the south end of the property and is shown, the proposed work is shown on drawing DP-04. The proposed work includes construction of a new 2-story storage workshop building, new roof access stair, new compressed gas cylinder storage, pre-manufactured chemical storage cabinets, and new facing to replace existing in order to eliminate and minimize the risk of unauthorized persons trying to access the site. Third element of the improvements is compound area 2, which is facing the highway and is shown on drawing DP05. The specific area will be mostly occupied by a snow monitoring program, which operates a network of 49 automated weather stations across the province. The stations are all placed in the areas extremely remote and difficult to access, and this site will serve as a place where they can prepare them for deployment. The data gathered by this network provides the backbone information for the water supply management and power generating seasonal flood forecasting in BC. At Malaview, the group will test equipment to verify errors and rectify issues prior to deployment in as near real conditions as it is possible. The system described is made of 3 major components: snow tower, instrument house, and snow pillow. Their location is indicated on the drawing DP05. Snow tower or test snow weather station require approximately 600 square feet of unobstructed working area, and its proposed location is the only area on the site suitable for that purpose. The instrument house is placed next to it and provides shelter to the devices that control the devices on the snow tower. And there needs to be a physical connection, hardwired connection between the tower and the house. So it must be affixed to the ground and must stay very close to the snow tower. The area will also be used to park trailer, which is a mobile air monitoring station. Scope of work in this area also include new storage structure, which is basically a sea storage relocated from the current location, which will be clad with wood slats. And also we will install a new fencing similarly to compound 1 to minimize the risk of unauthorized persons trying to access the site. To accommodate various instruments in compound 2 and to accommodate a requested right of way, we ask the setback reduction from 7.5 meters to 0.5 meters. Other proposed site improvements include installation of car charging stations, installation of bicycle storage, installation of oil grease interceptors, and inspection chambers. I hope I was able to shed some light on the proposed improvements, and I want to thank you again for providing me with the opportunity to present this very important project. Thank you for your time, and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Propotny. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions from the presentation. Seeing none, thank you for the detailed presentation. Thank you for the materials that were submitted in our council package, and we will be coming to it as an agenda item very shortly. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And with that, we will move to the section on our agenda item. And again, it's Development Permit Application Number DP100821 and Development Variance Permit Application Number DV100300, the commercial property at 2071 Malaview Avenue West. And I would turn to staff if they would like to give an introduction, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me?
Yes. Good evening, Ms. Verhagen.
Yes. Good evening. Yeah, so this application is for a development permit and a development variance permit for the project described by the architect there. I think he covered it quite thoroughly. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Verhagen. I'll turn to colleagues first if there are any questions. I do have one myself. Seeing none, my question is with regards to the comment during the presentation with regards to security. So this is immediately adjacent to the pedestrian cycling path. And it sounds like this is pretty valuable equipment, and he did speak to it being a chain link fence. versus a solid barrier as the fencing. I guess I have two questions. The first question is landscaping normally not required along the perimeter of a property, even if it's a commercial property?
To the mayor, yes, landscaping is required by the zoning bylaw for screening, yes.
Okay, but where it's not required that we make a variance to that in this application?
I will check that section of the zoning bylaw and let you know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the second, with regards to security, is barbed wire permitted in this commercial area? If that was a request, I don't see it in the application, but these diagrams are fairly small in our package.
The town zoning bylaw regulates the maximum height of fences, but doesn't indicate anything about barbed wire, so it is permitted.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no questions from colleagues, so we do have a recommendation in the report.
I'll move that development permit number DP 100821 and development variance permit number DV 100300 applications for the property located at 2071 Malaview Avenue West be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for further review and comment.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? And none opposed. That motion carries. Thank you. We'll next turn to the adoption of the minutes from our regular council meeting of May 25th.
I'll move the minutes be adopted.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any errors, omissions, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. I do not have a mayor's report this evening. We'll turn to 3 council reports and begin with Councillor O'Keefe on the as our liaison to the South Island Prosperity Project, also known as SIP. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a few things from SIP. First item is the report referred to as the Greater Victoria's next chapter. So during the COVID Recovery Task Force consultations, it was noted how severely the tourism industry was hit by the pandemic, and other business sectors identified an opportunity to diversify and how could we build on the strong international brand the region had already established for tourism? And so in order to expand our presence on the global stage, we needed to take stock of where we are, what other comparable metropolitan areas are doing, and some of the things we can do to achieve what's called greater global fluency. So that's what these 3 reports focus on. Some highlights from the report. They talked about the advantages that Greater Victoria has already, which is a good environment, low pollution, access to nature, low crime, very good healthcare and education, a very good niche location in the Pacific Northwest, well-established international center for higher education and tourism, and several industries already that have an international presence, such as the film and TV industry, marine, and digital technology. Some of the problem areas are trouble attracting and retaining young workers, expensive housing, very few large anchor firms than comparable peer regions, and a less established clustering and co-location of industries. At the time, also, they commented on some of the new economic realities that we need to pay attention to, which is rapid digitization, automation, aging societies, insufficiently diversified economies, trade conflicts, and competition from emerging markets. So these demand new approaches. So many of Greater Victoria's biggest advantages are more the product of happy accident rather than intentional investment, leadership, or innovation. So with those new economic realities that we talked about, we can't afford to sit back and rely on how things have been in the past, and we need to be more proactive. So what do we need to do? Pay attention to what's going on in the global economy, understand our strengths, assets, and relationships, that community profiles project that we're involved in will help us with that, and be proactive to take advantage of emerging opportunities. And for us, having an economic development strategy is a step in the right direction there. And I guess, you know, the reason we should pay attention to this is because, as I said, we're going to be developing our own economic development strategy. It's important for us to understand where we sit in the global world. And CIP has done the research for us. Now we just have to take the opportunity to take a look at that and see how we can be mindful of that when we're developing our own strategies. So that's that on those reports. I'll move next to a bit of an update on COAST, which is the Center for Ocean Applied Sustainable Technologies. Again, this is another thing that came out of the COVID Recovery Task Force, and looking to, it was noted that Canada, although we have the longest coastline in the world, our marine industry drastically underperforms compared to smaller countries. So CIP took the leadership on this. They got some funding from the Western Economic Diversification Canada and City of Victoria. They've had numerous consultations with industry and other stakeholders. They finalized the business case for COAST in December and appointed an interim board of directors. They're now recruiting a full-time CEO to lead the next phase to put this into action. And what they'll be aiming to do is to give this region a strong international position in the global economic ocean economy. This is another thing I think Sydney might want to pay attention to. We already have several marine-based businesses that are included in this ocean cluster, and there's opportunity for growth. So something we might want to pay some attention to in the future. Moving on to a little bit of an update on the Indigenous Prosperity Center. So again, this is another thing that came out of that Rising Economy Task Force, and it isn't part of the CIP strategic plan. And one of the recommendations was to set up a Indigenous owned and directed economic development office for South Vancouver Island. So that's what they're working on. It started last fall with invitations being sent out to 10 local First Nations and First Nations organizations. That includes all our First Nations out here on the Saanich Peninsula. And they're moving ahead now to do further engagement and to conduct a gap analysis and identify initial projects to help them move along with that. Finally, just a little bit of an update on upcoming events. CIP has frequently speakers that they host at no cost to CIP members. So these are available to all members of council and also to members of our EAP if they'd like to participate. The next one is June 17th, and that will be Canada's leading economist, Avery Shenfield from CIBC, and he'll be talking about helping us understand what is happening in the global and national economies, what are the influencers and impacts of the pandemic, and what are we envisioning for the future. So if you're interested in that, you can go to the CIP website and sign up. And that's it for me, unless anybody has questions.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to colleagues. Thank you again for your update.
I would just move that we distribute the information in the report to members of EAC.
We have a motion. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you again. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett, our liaison to both the Shaw Centre for the Salish Sea and the Memorial Park Society. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll give a brief update first on the Memorial Park Society. Attended the last board meeting on May 27th. At that time, they showed the actual revenue for January through April, showing a deficit of $20,929, which was actually better than what they budgeted for, which was $24,596. So they're actually better off by almost $3,700. So that's a plus, actually, given everything. If all continues going well with the COVID numbers and vaccinations, I wrote this before today. So we'll be going to 50-person presentations starting tomorrow. And from what Mr. Edge, Executive Director, indicated, they're booking up very fast. So it's a very popular venue, and people are wanting to get in there. So that's really good news. As for the vaccination site, VIHA came, and they were very complimentary on how well it was running. In fact, they felt there were no tweaks necessary at all, and that's not been the case at other venues. So that speaks to excellent in what they're doing there. And there's also a possibility of an extension into October if it's needed. And this is an interesting fact. The most vaccinations they've given in a single day up till now has been 900. So they're moving them through. That's pretty incredible for the size of our community. Canada Day, again, will be offered virtually through the Mary Winspear Centre, and Check 6 will be providing coverage at 8 p.m. following Jeopardy, for those of you who watch that. I think it's important to mention that this Canada Day celebration will have a First Nation component. And this was established long before what happened in Kamloops and the discovery. So, and they have gone back and reached out to the First Nations community, and they are still on board with doing it. So I think it's important for the community to know that it's a collaborative effort that's being put forward. The Sydney Street Market, which has been moved to the Mary Winspear parking lot for this year, is proceeding very well. Initially, there were 50 booths and 2,200 people were going through on the first weekend. It runs until October. I usually in town on every Sunday pretty much, and it's bustling and bustling, so it's very popular, and I expect it'll only increase as the summer goes on. Some information on the Parkland track. They've gone with the 6-lane track upgrade, which is estimated to cost $880,000, but Mr. Edgett feels it's possible we can get it closer to $720, but we'll find out whether or not they can make those numbers work. To date, $369,856 has been raised. The upgrade will have a soccer field on the inside, as well as an area for shot put, javelin, and long jump. The track itself will be paved with a 1/4-inch rubberized surface on top, which apparently is much better for the joints for people who are running. They're feeling very, very confident they can reach their fundraising goal by the end of the year. But if anyone out there would like to donate, they will be given a tax receipt, and you can reach out to a Mary Winspear Centre or the Parkland Secondary School. They are also put in a plan to put $27,000 a year aside in a contingency fund for funding renewal. So that's a great thing as well. And if everything goes as planned and goes well, they're hoping they'll be breaking ground in April of next year, 2022. And an update for the users of Blue Heron Park. The Blue Heron trails will be getting a cleanup, as the hogweed and other invasive species will be part of a removal effort. So for those of you who use that park, apparently it will be looking much better soon. And that's it for that one. Shaw Centre for the CLC. So I wasn't able to attend the meeting on May 25th, but I did have communications with the Executive Director, Ms. Pauline Finn, because we had a council meeting that night. From March 1st to April 30th, revenue from admissions were at 56% of 2019, and we'll be using 2019 as a reference because, of course, they weren't open in 2020. Membership sales were at 93% of 2019, and retail sales were at 55% of 2019. Net earnings for the year to April 30th, 2021 was $128,011, so doing quite well considering. Using the continuity plan, they are forecasting a year-end net surplus of just under $74,000. Most of this revenue was earned during the first 3 months of the year, which is their important time. However, it is worth noting that both the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy and Town of Sydney support were also critically important in helping them reach this position. And of course, as the financial position improves, the wage subsidy lessens. That's the way the formula works. The centre started a Groupon campaign last year, which is a mission for one or a family group of 2 adults and 2 children at a 22% discount. It was launched on December 8th, 2020, and 810 were sold. So there was quite a big uptake, 683 single and 227 family. And 66% have been redeemed to date. And the average online rating is 4.6 out of 5 for people that have attended it. And of these Groupon people, 63% were new visitors. So, and 24% were people that hadn't visited for more than 6 months. So that's great that we're getting new people in the door. The Shaw Centre's Canada Summer Jobs Grant for 2020 was approved, allowing for 5 positions at the facility. The Salish, The Salish Sea Store has some new vendors, and in keeping with the local island theme, they are Standing Spruce Farm and Apothecary out of Campbell River, and they offer wild-crafted products including skincare, healing oils, and balms. Owl and Bear Studio out of Victoria, and they offer enamel pins and stickers. And finally, Hello Yellow Canary, I love that name, out of Ladysmith, offering prints, stickers, and cards. The Shaw Centre Strategic Plan Community Survey is up and running on their website. Another option providing feedback is at Imagine Our Future at salishseacenter.org. Again, that's Imagine Our Future at salishseacenter.org. Please take the time to provide comments, suggestions, or take the survey and help the Centre with their future plans. And more recently, last week, Wanda, the Centre's giant Pacific octopus animal ambassador, was released in Ucluelet. On June 6th, the Centre had 372 visitors, its second most since reopening, with many visitors coming to say goodbye to Wanda. And I just last night got this information that as of to date, June 13th, they're at 103% of the 2019 revenue, which or people coming in, which has matched the pre-pandemic volume, which is incredible. And their net sales is at 90% of 2019. So hopefully the rest of the summer will continue on that pace now that we've had a lot of these restrictions lifted. Finally, this information has already been made public, but I would like to highlight for Council and the community that the Executive Director of the Shaw Centre, Ms. Pauline Finn, was recently awarded an honour by Science World BC. Ms. Finn was employed with Science World before coming to the Shaw Centre and has been recognised for her contributions there by being named a patron of their society. So to put this in perspective, Dr. Bonnie Henry was at the same time named a friend of the society, which is its highest honor. So this is a great honor from Miss Finn, and another indication of the good fortune the town of Sydney has in having such excellent people running these important facilities in our community. And I'd just like to close by saying, having also been the liaison for the museum, sorry for extending this a little, but just came to me that I think it's really important to note that these three organizations who are so important in our community, they've done a fantastic job throughout the pandemic and were really quick to pivot, have held themselves financially, and I think if anything have actually enhanced their relevance in the community. And through their efforts and what they've accomplished, I think that they've actually raised the community profile. And I expect that this will lead to good things for our community going forward once we come through the other side of this tunnel. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett, for all three positive updates. And I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Seeing none, I have one. Going back to the Memorial Park Society, you did mention that with the changing pandemic restrictions, they'll be able to have functions in the hall. As we know, the vaccination clinic is taking place in the large Bodine Hall. So they're able to use the Charlie White Theatre and the other meeting rooms while that clinic is ongoing?
As far as I know, yeah. They have it set up. They've got it all worked out, and Mr. Edgett is pretty fabulous at doing it. So yeah.
No, that's great. Again, thank you for the updates. And last but not least, I'll turn to Councillor Duncan for an update as our liaison to Peninsula Streams. Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. So Peninsula Streams held their AGM on May 29th. They are in a similar position financially to the museum in that they did better in 2020 than they did in 2019. In 2019, they did finish in a bit of a deficit, but the federal grant programs and the wage top-ups helped them out there, even though they couldn't do their usual fundraising. So they're going to be able to capitalize on that moving forward, I think, and recover in a good position. Longtime staff person Brian Koval will be outgoing, and they've found a new staff person, Kyle Armstrong. So we'll have somebody new that our town staff will be working with when they work on Ray Creek going forward. A number of the significant grants and corporate sponsorships that came in for Peninsula Streams was on their mill stream work, which is not in the Sydney area, but if anybody would like to see the kind of really big large fish ladder works that they've been doing along that stream, several kilometers up the stream, they're opening up new spawning grounds. They have videos that they put up of a lot of the works that they've done over the past year on their website at peninsulastreams.ca, and it's really worth seeing what they do with all that equipment and the expertise that comes in, and then the relationship they've had with the Saanich staff in order to be able to do that. So I look forward to being able to work with them that closely, perhaps in Sydney as well. One of the things they've been doing here in Sydney is looking at the blue carbon project that they will be doing baseline studies out at Roberts Bay. They started doing data collection there on May 28th. And I guess one thing to really point out in terms of the importance of the work that we do here in Sydney, we feel like we're a small municipality, but they have a map that they show that shows the dozens of sites, or maybe a little over a dozen sites that they sample for forage fish all throughout the CRD. And there are maybe a dozen or so that they don't find any. There's one in a Esquimalt lagoon that they find, both species, and, like 3 others that they find, one species. And then all of the beaches that they sample around North Saanich and Sydney, they find both species of forage fish. It's just all dark colored all around the tip of our peninsula. So, we have a really great environment here that's still in really good condition. And they said that this year was probably the largest grant that they've gotten from Sydney historically. So I'm proud to be part of a council that's helping good work like that happen. And if people were interested in their financial statements or any more detailed information about their projects, it's all online. So I won't go into as much detail. But if you have any questions, feel free.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'll turn to colleagues. Seeing no questions, thank you for the update. We'll now turn to committee reports. And the first, I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright, our liaison to the Economic Advisory Committee, in the minutes of the May 13th meeting.
I'll move that the minutes be received.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. And I'll turn to Councillor Duncan, one of our 3 council liaisons to the Beacon Wharf Select Committee, and the minutes from the May 5th and May 26th meetings.
I'll move that both sets of minutes be received.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Not opposed. Motion carries. And there is a recommendation. Councillor Duncan?
Yep. The committee so moved, and I recommend that the P3 proposal from Sydney Waterfront Partnership be deferred to the July 12th, 2021 council meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Call a question. All in favor? Not opposed. That motion carries. Thank you, Councillor Duncan. And turn to Councillor Rintoul with regards to the Advisory Planning Commission meeting of June the 1st.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move the minutes be received.
Second.
All discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps I'll just pause to provide some commentary. The record of the decision summarized the conversation that took place. And I think the only item I'll address is that there was a fair amount of discussion around pay in lieu, as well as cap on the number of spaces, or percentage, of spaces that could be eligible for pay in lieu. You'll note that there was a motion. I feel as if the consensus was probably such that what's proposed in the bylaw may not have met with the APC's desire in terms of finding that sweet spot between the amount that is suggested for pay in lieu, as well as the cap that is suggested for the eligible number of spaces. Having said that, the motion was defeated. There was considerable discussion around whether or not to look to try and move another figure with regard to that. And I think the APC felt that just sending the message to council that there's consensus around some concern for pay in lieu, and that percentage would probably be satisfactory enough. I'll leave my comments there, and there is a recommendation post this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. And sorry, we do have a sorry, that was with regards to the minutes. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you. And the Advisory Planning Commission recommends, and I so move, that bylaw number 2177 be brought forward for council's consideration.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. We'll turn to staff reports. We have 5 this evening. The first is item 13A, liquor license amendment application for Victoria Distillers. A report from staff dated June 8th, and I'll turn to staff for an introduction, please.
Mr. Mayor. So this is an application for a liquor license amendment for Victoria Distillers at 9891 Seaport Place. This license was first approved in 2016 with a lounge endorsement and a special event area endorsement. Since that time, by all accounts, these folks have been responsible member of the business community, and we certainly haven't heard any noise complaints or anything of that nature related to this business. We should note as well that since it was first adopted, the zoning for the site hasn't changed, so it is still in compliance with all the zoning for the property, and this change to the amendment wouldn't change its compliance with respect to that zoning. The license does present a slight decrease in the occupant load for the site from 262 persons in the building to 254. And as the applicant mentioned, the breakdown of the two endorsements for this license would go away. There was sort of previously a breakdown in how many people were under the lounge endorsement and how many people were under the special event area endorsement. And of course, now they'd be all under the special event area endorsement. There's a slight change in the hours of operation proposed here. Just on Sunday, going from what is now a 6 p.m. close to a 10 p.m. close, and all the other times for the business remain the same. And given the fairly minor nature of the change here, staff don't expect that the property would have a major change in how it's being used. Staff are recommending that it be forwarded to public comment. The applicant has requested that council consider skipping that. That is an option. The town can opt out of gathering public comment, and in this case, staff understand that that would be left to the LCRB to do themselves. We have never seen that done, so we're not sure what the LCRB's public gathering of views process looks like, but that is an option if council is interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. Turn to colleagues, and I'll first turn to Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff. So just in terms of the time change for Sundays from 6 to 10, if they were to have an event, can you pinpoint exactly, is the patio I'm looking at the picture and trying to figure out where the patio is, having never actually been on the patio, been in the lounge, but not the patio. Can you look at the picture and tell me, does it face the Peart hotel residences? Or is it on the other side?
Through the mayor to Councillor Garnett, no, the patio is on the rum runner side of the building. Perfect. Okay. Between the building itself, and I believe there's a hedge or something right there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Between the rum runner, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. So my understanding from the report and the owner's comments is that there's really no significant change of use to the property. It sounds like more of a technical sort of thing that they're doing to make it so people can move more within in the premises. Is my understanding of that correct?
Through the mayor to Councillor Keith, yes, I think so. The overall occupant load would be largely the same as before, whereas before you might have had some of those people sitting in the lounge and some on the patio or touring the facility. You would now have all sort of either on the patio or touring the facility. Okay. The number of people on site is comparable.
Okay. And getting back to his point about not, it sounds like he wants this to be a more speedy process. Do we know whether it would be a more speedy process if it was left to the LCRB rather than we doing it ourselves?
I don't know. Unfortunately, we did request some information on the LCRB from the LCRB on that point, and we haven't heard back. In my time in Sydney, that hasn't happened, so I don't know what that process looks like when the LCRB undertakes it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that last question through to staff. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. If we chose not to have a public consultation process, LCRB would definitely, they would do a public consultation process in lieu of us not doing one? Is that understood?
Typically, I would say yes, that would be the case. That's what's written in their guide to this process in their documentation. We have had a phone conversation with a representative from the LCRB on this particular license application. They seem to suggest that because they see it as fairly minor, they might treat it somewhat differently. But I think that's sort of maybe a bridge that they would cross if it came, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. And I have a second question with regards to the occupant load, and it is covered in the report, and you've spoken to it, and it reduces slightly given the slight change in use. But there is an indoor component and an outdoor component to this overall occupancy load. Given that there is an indoor and an outdoor, is the occupancy load split between a maximum number permitted indoors and outdoors?
It was originally. The patio itself has its own occupant load, and I believe that's unchanged. So the outdoor total occupant load, I don't believe, is different between the previous license and this iteration of the license. It's just how many people are inside the building and where they're located in there.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate, when the lounge license was originally approved, that the occupancy load would have been established at that time. It said that this is an LCRB license occupant load. I don't know whether you, Mr. Newcomb, or perhaps Fire Chief Mickelson is still with us. If that is reviewed at the time, and do they align the LCRB occupancy loads and our fire occupancy loads?
I'll just say that there might be 3 occupant loads that come into play here. I'm not sure, maybe Chief Mickelson can clarify, but there's a building code derived occupant load that we do for the applicant. In that case, that occupant load is actually higher than the occupant load that the LCRB has calculated. And I'm not sure, Chief Mickelson, if we use that building code occupant load for fire purposes as well.
Yes, that is correct. Myself and the fire prevention officer did go through when substantive changes were made to the production facility to kind of facilitate this change in process. And as you are well aware, the building code requires certain amount of egress paths per the amount of persons allowed inside, et cetera. And we went through that, and there were no issues when we did our walkthrough from a BC building code or from a fire code perspective. I honestly cannot speak to any liquor board requirements, but from a fire code, which is a companion document to the BC building code, we have no issues.
That's great. Thank you. Any further questions from staff? Seeing none, so we do have a staff recommendation, but we do have an option before us. I would turn to council at their pleasure. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'll move that we respond to the LCRB. The council will make no comment on the application.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second for discussion.
We have it seconded for discussion. Councillor O'Keefe.
Yeah, so based on what I understand from staff and the applicant, there's no significant change in here that I think would impact the surrounding community. Our fire chief had looked at things previously, so there doesn't seem to be any issues there. So in the interest in supporting businesses that want to move ahead in our community, I'm happy to let this go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I concur that if this truly is going to help facilitate this to ease the business's ability with LCRB to make this change, I'm comfortable with that, given the very, very minor change that is requested here. I wasn't completely convinced from the staff response that we are indeed making the process easier, in that what is recommended by staff is the normal course of action for this type of request. And I know we're through with the discussion period, but if there's if anyone had a different takeaway or any further comment to, I guess, reassure council, if that is indeed the intent of the motion, the reference in the report to the LCRB undertaking their own public consultation process and to make the determination. Again, as per Mr. Newcomb's comments, I don't know if we know what that looks like. Are we truly making this an easier process for the applicant? I don't know. So I guess I just don't want to think that we've gone down any unintentional consequences here for the applicant, is my concern, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. Councillor Garnett. Sorry, I'll turn to Mr. Newcomb if first. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may just suggest, the technical language that the LCRB uses in this case is to opt out of commenting on the application. And if council is amenable to that, I might just suggest that wording in the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the staff, how long does our process normally take from start to finish?
Through the mayor to Councillor Garnett, due to the reduced frequency of the Peninsula News Review, as a result of the COVID pandemic, it now takes about a month. We have to skip a council meeting and go back to the subsequent, bring the comment from the community back to the subsequent council meeting. Before that, we could come back within one council meeting cycle, but it's two now due to the advertising requirement for the newspaper.
Thank you. Yeah, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I have some reservations because at least we know what we're dealing with. And although I understand what Councillor O'Keefe's saying, and I would like to expedite the process, we don't necessarily know that the LCRB is going to do that. And they're a bureaucracy like everything else. So this isn't going to be high priority for them. They're going to get to it when they can get to it. So I'm just afraid that going that process is going to take longer. And we may mean well by trying to go that route, but it may end up not working out. And at least this way we have some control over it. So that's kind of where I'm leaning, I think. Thank you.
No, thank you, Councillor. A further comment? I'll just add my comment, recognizing Councillor Garnett's comment. Sorry, questions through to staff. So it would likely be able to come back to our July 12th meeting? Sorry? Oh, that's committee of the July. So July 19th would be our July 19th meeting. Okay, so just over a month. I have a second question, and that's with regards to the motion that's on the floor. It seems to me that by opting out of making a comment or not making a comment, we're leaving it up to the LCRB to, discern what they wish to do. Is there a reason, given the information that's been provided to us, that we could not actually provide a more positive motion that we support the application as presented? Mr. Newcomb.
My understanding of the LCRB policy in this regard is that if council wants to provide a positive comment that the license be amended, we also must gather the views of residents within the designated area.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Sorry,
Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, sorry, I was just being mindful of Mr. Newcomb's comments in terms of perhaps amending the wording of the motion. So to change that instead of making comment to opt out of making comment. Is that the appropriate wording, Mr. Newcomb?
Yes, the LCRB refers to it as opting out of commenting.
Okay, so I would like to change or move that it be amended to reflect that wording.
Okay, seconder for the amendment?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. I was taking it as a friendly amendment that was done, but I appreciate the procedure. And so we'll go back to, if there's no further discussion, to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? I'm in favor. The motion carries. We'll turn to item 13B, the renaming of Reay Creek to ඞELSET. We have a report from staff dated June 8th. Turn to staff for an introduction, please.
Good evening. Thank you. So this, the town received a referral from the BC Geographical Naming Office, BC Geographical Names Office, to comment on the renaming. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. To comment on the renaming of Reay Creek to ຄຼELSET. This is the chosen name for Reay Creek. Staff have been aware of this process for a little while, so we did work in a question in the Reay Creek Park engagement, asking people if they would be in favor of renaming the park if this name change is adopted by the BC Geographical Names Office. This is specifically for the water body, Reay Creek, and not for the park. So the question asked if park users would be in favor of renaming the park if the water body was named to ݹλσετ, and 72%, over 72% of the 91 respondents said yes, they were in favor of that. So we do have support from the community for using that name. And the recommendation is that we respond to the BC Geographical Names Office indicating support for changing the name of Reay Creek to ŁELSET.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And while I'm supportive of the recommendation, I'm just wondering, does staff have an understanding of the process by the province and the BC Geographical Names Office with respect to notifying anyone who may be associated or may have comment on the current name of the creek, given the namesake that's been identified? Do we have any idea in terms of sort of consultation in that direction?
Through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul, I'm not aware if they were able to locate anyone in the Reay family. We did pass on that information to the BC Geographical Names Office. We passed on the information that we had with respect to the history of the naming of the creek, and it is really in their court to engage with the people who need to be engaged with.
A follow-up, Councillor Rintoul?
Thank you. And so the staff report has a paragraph with respect to the current namesakes of Reay Creek, which is quite brief. Is that all the information essentially the town had with regard to the selection of the name for Reay Creek?
Through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul, there is a little bit more information on our website. This is a summary of it. I don't have all that information available right now, though.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to understand the process really that the province undertakes, and so I appreciate your comments, Ms. Clary.
Thank you. Councillor Fallon.
Thank you very much. Through you to staff. Would the signage carry both names, or would this be strictly now the ŒLSET Creek, or would there be any indication <coughs>Celset Creek, formerly Reay Creek, or Reay Creek underneath it?
Through the mayor to Councillor Fallett. A lot of the signage is the town's signage, so we could choose to change it as we wish. This is really just for changing the name of the water body in the BC geographical names database. So we would have to make that decision as we get into changing the signs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fallett. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Question through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff. So I recall in, I believe in the survey or the plans for the additional amenities and things around Rae Creek, talk about interpretive signage, I believe. Is this something where we could have interpretive signage that incorporated both parts of the history of that area? Because it's interesting, both the First Nations aspect and then the historical aspect involving the Reay brothers. So is that something that we could incorporate when we make those changes to the park area?
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, that's definitely something we could do. Those signs haven't been developed at this point, so if that's something that we'd like to have included, we could do that.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot more information about the Reay brothers, and again, our museum and archives could provide some support with that, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. A follow-up question. Is there precedence for other Senchothan names in our community that have just the Senchothan name, or have the Senchothan and a name that our settler culture attached to it when we began living in the area, or during the time we've lived in the area? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Actually, I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright. Turn to Mr. Humble.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm not aware of any, but maybe Councillor Wainwright has his hand up, so he might be.
Thank you, Councillor Wainwright.
In terms of Senchothan names, CM Harbor, Callista Park. So yeah, we do.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's at the time anything more recent that we have changed. And just, I guess, a question of clarification. Will this be ɁCOLSET Creek or just ḵELSET?
It is just ḵELSET.
Thank you. Okay, so no further questions from staff. We do have a recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation that a response be provided to the BC Geographical Names Office indicating support for changing the name of Rae Creek to ḵELSET.
Second.
Discussion, Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, I'll just briefly comment, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Keith had an excellent suggestion in terms of an opportunity for some historical recognition at the site, which would also incorporate, of course, the settler name as well as the First Nations Saanich name. So, a great suggestion by Councillor Keith. Thank you.
Thank you. I might just add that I had reached out to Saanich Nation, and we, Mr. Humble and I, wanted to first try to have some dialogue with Saanich Nation in terms of a interpretive sign in the park with information on the fish and other habitat species in that habitat, with historical significance to Saanich Nations, and actually speaking to prevention of what recently happened with the recent fish kill, in terms of that being a significant catchment area for the creek included, and that could be Rae Creek. So on that particular, I think it would be helpful to have an indication from Saanich Leadership Council of their interest in working together on that, and I was prepared to bring that to a future council meeting once we've had that communication with Saanich Leadership Council. So, but thank you for bringing that forward this evening. So we haven't moved and seconded. No further discussion. All in favor? And none opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We'll next turn to item 13C, which is changes to the RCMP capital plan. We have a report from staff dated June 4th. I'd turn to staff for an introduction, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll recall that last summer, Council approved a change to the RCMP capital plan, adding a secure parking lot project while deferring two other projects. However, the parking lot did not proceed due to concerns we had about traffic impacts on both sides of the civic site. So in gearing up for the project early this year, we updated the quote that we had received upon which the budget was based, and it came in higher than what we received a year ago. And in order for the project to advance, additional funding will be required. As a reminder, the project essentially involves fencing off of the parking lot to provide security for the RCMP vehicles as well as for the building. In order to fund the anticipated overage for this project, once again, another capital project will be deferred. It is a cost-shared project, so the town picks up roughly 48% of the total. So the net impact for the town would be just over $13,000. The recommendation is that the budget be increased.
Thank you, Mr. Hisik. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, we do have a recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation that the budget for the RCMP secure parking lot project be increased from $80,000 to $108,000, and that the RCMP flooring replacement project be deferred to 2022.
Second.
Thank you. We have moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed. That motion carries. Thank you. And we'll turn to item 13D, the 2020 Statement of Financial Information. It's an annual process we go through, and we do have a recommendation as per the report.
I'll move the recommendation that council approves the statement of financial information for the town of Sydney for the year ended December 31st, 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed. That motion carries. And lastly, we'll move to the monthly building permit report for May.
We received for information.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. We'll next turn to the raised item, the letter from Mr. Rinald under that is now item 14A. And I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And in that Mr. Rinald wrote to council and also spoke to this item this evening, I thought it prudent to use the opportunity, given that this change, as he pointed out, was recent, and that residents will have only noticed this on recent utility statements, whether or not feedback to the town has been similar or in any great volume. As I understand it, and I'll ask through to staff for them to speak to this, Mr. Rinald's concern relates to the fixed portion of the charge, in effect, that we have added to the water statement, which is in relation to maintenance of the system, those operating costs of the system. Has created a situation where low volume users are essentially paying more than they were previously when it was simply based on the volume of consumption. And I recollect staff had wanted to try and mitigate that for the very reason that basing those charges on volume, it fluctuates. And so I think our financial staff pointed out to us that we were at risk of short funding the operational aspect of the account. And so I understand Mr. Rinald's concern. I believe a fellow councillor spoke to it at the time and wanted to gauge from staff whether or not we're hearing much feedback, or for others on council for that matter, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to staff first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So with respect to the change in water rates, we were quite proactive with our messaging around this change in rate structure. We provided a message in the last quarter bill for 2020 letting people know of the upcoming change. And then when we actually implemented it with the first quarter of this year, we included a detailed 2-page information sheet that explained as well as possible why we were enacting this change. And that mailer was quite well received. We received compliments on it indicating it was clear and understandable. We received a fairly small number of direct phone calls and emails to the finance department, primarily, I should say, from multifamily residential customers who were trying to figure out how to allocate the new charges. Most of these were addressed rather quickly and easily by finance staff. There were 4 letters which were received through the administration department to which I had to respond in writing, including Mr. Rinald's. So all in all, a relatively low volume of feedback for our $4,000 to $5,000 utility, 4,000 to 5,000 utility accounts. I must say that in hindsight, perhaps keeping our rates stable for as long as we did, with only 1 increase in 10 years, may have worked against us in that had we been increasing rates each year to keep up with the cost of the service, this 1 increase might have been a little less perceptible. However, in terms of process, we did check what other jurisdictions were doing out there. We didn't do this in a vacuum. What was clear to us is that nobody had a perfect system. Everyone made some compromises. So having listened to the few concerns that we did receive and thought about it over and over again, as well as the 2 years we put into thinking this through before we brought it forward, we stand by the careful analysis that we undertook in recommending the new structure. The premise was that our revenues were insufficient and structured improperly, and we specifically rejected the concept of simply raising the user rates under the existing billing structure, and we showed council in our presentation why that would not address our revenue needs. The impacts to users were exactly as predicted in the staff report and presentation. And our bottom line is that our water service is still extremely reasonable, and a very low volume user still pays roughly $10 a month for water service. If council has any further questions, I'd be pleased to address them.
Thank you, Mr. Hisick. I'll turn to colleagues. Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to follow up, if I may, to Mr. Hisick, the suggestion I think in Mr. Rinald's presentation was that staff may well be considering this as an option when looking to revisit sewer and how funds are recouped to operate the system and maintain it. If you could comment on that, please. And then obviously, this discussion this evening presents the opportunity, for residents to provide further comment. This is new, and I think it will remains to be seen. A couple of financial cycles out, how effective it's been, and so I think council not only will be aware of that and alert to this, but also I think residents as they look at their utility statements over the course of the year. So if I could, just through to staff, comment on their thoughts in terms of what may come forward and if this is a model that's under consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. We anticipate beginning our sewer analysis in the summer, and right now, while this may be a model that we'll consider, the sewer system does have different set of costs, and it might not be where we end up. So at this point, it's premature, but certainly we'll take any learnings we can achieve through the first year of the water system, and perhaps even delay the recommendation on the sewer until this is played out a little longer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And just a follow-up to that. So it was anticipated late this fall to possibly bring forward the sewer?
The initial plan was to get it done by the end of 2021 for implementation next year. And it may still happen, but we'll have to see how other projects impact our capacity for the rest of the year.
Thank you. And just a suggestion, and the comment has already been made, that if we are looking at that, whether we look at it in the fall of this year or into 2022, is perhaps we could receive an update from staff on further comment from the public on the current changes to water, so that we have that information when we're considering a possible change to sewer. Thank you. If we could have a motion to receive this information, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second. No further discussion. All in favor? And none opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. And we do have remaining items under correspondence for information.
Move receipt for information.
Second.
All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. We have no notices of motions. No motion to go on camera. Look for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor? None opposed. Thank you. Thank you to colleagues on council. Thank you to staff, and thank you to members of the public for taking an interest this evening. Good evening.